Usually when we think about learning a brand new skill, especially, something as intimidating as a new language, there is this expectation of immediate, overwhelming complexity.
Oh, totally. Like you have to master everything on day one.
Right. You know the feeling. I mean, it's like being dropped into the middle of a bustling foreign city with nothing but a massive 10-pound dictionary and a map you can't even read.
And the prevailing wisdom has always been about total immersion, which, let's be honest, often just turns into total panic.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
old sink or swim mentality.
And most of us just end up desperately dog paddling, just hoping we don't drown in irregular verbs. But when you look at the actual architecture of effective adult learning, that entire sink or swim methodology seems, well, it seems incredibly outdated.
Downright cruel,
Yeah,
honestly.
downright cruel. But today we're looking at a structural landscape that is just a masterpiece of pacing and empathy. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is to unpack a truly fascinating blueprint for language acquisition.
It really is a fascinating document.
We got our hands on a structural framework for a program called English with Ease, Mastering Greetings and Introductions, and it's brilliant.
What we have here is basically a masterclass in instructional design. We are looking at a highly specific, very intentional 20 to 25-minute framework.
Right, and it's for a very specific audience, right?
Exactly. It's aimed strictly at adults and young adults who are beginner to intermediate English learners. So those A1 to B2 levels in linguistic terms.
So the core challenge this document addresses is universal for anyone listening who has tried to learn a language. How exactly do you build someone's confidence in a brand new language from day one without just completely overwhelming them?
Which is the hardest part.
It is. How do you take a learner from that deer in the headlights paralysis to actually opening their mouth and speaking, all in under half an hour? Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To understand how this framework builds fluency, we really first have to look at how it sets the stage and why it chooses to focus on the absolute bare-bone basics of human connection.
Yeah, and notice how the curriculum actually starts. It completely skips the traditional vocabulary drop.
No huge list of words to memorize.
Right, none of that. The opening phase of this blueprint mandates a warm welcome, followed immediately by a detailed explanation of why greetings and introductions are important in daily life.
The why before the what.
Exactly. The guidelines even explicitly instruct the teachers to use a friendly, encouraging delivery. They deliberately pace their speech to be slightly slower than a normal native conversation.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though. Spending time on a warm welcome and, explaining the importance of a greeting, it feels a bit like stretching before a light walk.
You think it's unnecessary?
Oh, I get the theory, but wait, why spend so much precious time justifying greetings? I mean, aren't greetings completely obvious to any adult? Shouldn't a 25-minute lesson just dive straight into the hard vocabulary to maximize the time on the clock?
Well, what's fascinating here is how this document rigorously prioritizes psychological comfort over sheer data transfer.
Psychological comfort.
Yeah. In linguistics and cognitive science, there is this concept called the affective filter. Think of it as, well, it's an invisible wall of anxiety that automatically goes up in your brain when you are stressed or embarrassed or overwhelmed.
Oh, like when a teacher calls on you and your mind just goes totally blank.
Exactly that. When that wall is up, no new information can get in. Your brain goes into a defensive posture. So by taking the time to explain the why before the what, and intentionally slowing down the cadence of the speech, the curriculum deliberately lowers that affective filter.
So you're saying that by treating the listener like an actual human being who needs reassurance, rather than just some flashcard memorizing robot, it actually improves the mechanical retention of the words later on.
Without a doubt. It really does. And for adult learners, context is everything. Think about it. Children can absorb language like sponges without needing a rational reason. They just mimic.
Right, they just repeat whatever they hear.
But adults need utility. We need to know the return on investment for our cognitive effort. Understanding the social utility of a greeting, knowing that mastering this specific interaction will help you navigate the grocery store or survive a job interview or just break the ice with a new neighbor. Yeah. It makes the subsequent memorization feel purposeful.
It gives it real stakes.
Yeah. It's no longer some abstract academic exercise you have to suffer through. It's a tangible tool you are handing them for immediate real-world survival.
Okay, so building the foundation of purpose before you start stacking the actual bricks of vocabulary. I like that. Let's look at those bricks then. Because once the learner understands the why, the blueprint moves directly into the mechanical building blocks of the language.
The actual words.
Right, but it does so with a very specific, almost rebellious rule regarding grammar.
Oh yeah. Moving into the mechanics, the framework lays out exact parameters for the lesson. It mandates teaching exactly 12 essential words, not 50, 12.
And it specifically cites words like hello, nice to meet you, introduce, conversation, and notably confident.
Confident.
Yeah. That specific list is just brilliant to me. I mean, hello and introduce are the obvious mechanical tools, but including the word confident in the foundational 12 words,
Very intentional.
they are literally teaching the vocabulary of the emotional state they want the learner to achieve. It's incredibly meta, but it also sends this subtle psychological signal to the listener about what the goal of the session actually is.
It really does. And the guidelines for teaching these 12 words leave absolutely nothing to chance. They require simple definitions, practical pronunciation tips, and clear example sentences.
No guessing games.
None. Furthermore, there is a hard and fast rule explicitly printed in the guidelines. Explain difficult words immediately. You do not let the learner sit in confusion. If a complex term is introduced, you define it in the same breath.
Which saves so much frustration.
It really does. But the most striking guideline here is the absolute mandate to avoid long grammar lectures.
Oh, thank goodness. So no conjugation tables, no terrifying whiteboards full of terms that, frankly, most native speakers don't even understand.
None of it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this reveals a very modern, evidence-based approach to adult education. It aggressively favors immediate practical application over theoretical linguistics.
Because nobody wants to feel like you're back in middle school language arts.
Exactly. The goal isn't to make the learner a grammarian capable of diagramming a sentence. The goal is to make them communicative.
Okay, but that raises a massive question for you or me or anyone who has ever tried to learn a language. How do you teach grammar? Specifically, the simple present tense, which the blueprint requires for these introductions. How do you teach that without giving a grammar lecture?
It sounds impossible, right?
It does. How do you teach the rules without explaining the rules? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The blueprint relies entirely on a clever psychological workaround.
It's so smart.
Yeah.
Rather than explaining the academic mechanics of the simple present tense-like breaking down subject, verb, and object, the curriculum utilizes contrast.
Contrast, okay.
Yeah, it instructs the teacher to present clear, correct examples side by side with glaringly incorrect examples.
So instead of saying the simple present tense requires the base form of the verb when introducing yourself, you say I introduce myself, not I am introduce myself.
Yes, it leverages the human brain's natural evolution as a pattern recognition machine. Think about how you might correct a toddler who is learning to speak.
Oh, right.
If a child says, I run to the park, you don't sit them down and explain irregular past tense verbs.
No, you just sound ridiculous.
Exactly. You just say, oh, you ran to the park. You provide the correct contrast. When you place a correct phrase next to an incorrect one in this framework, the adult brain automatically spots the structural difference,
The learner intuits the underlying rule naturally.
completely bypassing the intellectual fatigue of a formal lecture.
It goes straight to practical usage. I love that. But knowing the isolated words and intuitively understanding the tense, that is really only half the battle, right?
Oh, definitely.
You can memorize all 12 of those vocabulary words, but if you freeze up when someone actually extends a hand and says hello to you, it doesn't matter.
It all goes out the window.
Right. So the next phase of this curriculum pivots hard. It is all about getting the learner to physically open their mouth and speak.
This is the transition from theoretical understanding to physical execution. The curriculum introduces a highly realistic conversation between two people meeting for the very first time. But it doesn't just play the audio clip and move on.
That would be too fast.
Way too fast. It specifically replays the key sentences from that interaction much, much more slowly.
It reminds me of learning a complex physical skill like a dance routine or a martial arts form.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, if you just stand there and watch a professional do a full routine at full speed, you are going to be completely lost. You might appreciate the beauty of it, but you can't replicate it.
You'd just be tripping over your own feet.
Exactly. You need the instructor to slow the music down. You need them to break the fluid motion into individual choppy steps. And crucially, you need them to leave natural extended pauses in the music for you to physically mimic those movements before moving on to the next beat.
That is the perfect analogy, because speaking a new language is quite literally a physical act. We often forget this.
We do. We treat it like math.
Right, but you are asking your vocal cords, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw to move in microscopic ways they have never moved before, to produce entirely unfamiliar phonetic sounds.
It's pure physical muscle memory.
It is. This strategy is deeply rooted in cognitive science. The repetition demanded by the framework isn't just about hearing the word again to cement its definition in your short-term memory. It's about mechanical reinforcement.
Making the mouth do the work.
Exactly. The document instructs the teacher to pause frequently and actively invite the listener to repeat useful phrases aloud. You have to build the literal neural pathways that connect the thought of the greeting to the physical execution of pushing air through your mouth to say it.
Okay, but this raises an important question. If you are just having people repeat the same phrase over and over, doesn't it inevitably start to feel like a robotic drill?
It can, yeah.
So how do you maintain that friendly conversational tone the blueprint demands while forcing adult learners to do repetitive vocal drills?
Well, that is the genius of the next requirement.
Mm.
The curriculum doesn't just stick to the basic hello. It introduces 10 everyday expressions used when meeting new people.
Oh, like variations.
Right. Things like, how's it going? What's up? Pleasure to meet you. How are things? And great to see you. By expanding the repertoire to 10 distinct variations, the repetition feels like natural, dynamic practice.
So you aren't just saying hello 50 times like a parrot.
Exactly. You are practicing variations within realistic contexts. And mechanically, this forces your mouth to practice different phonetic combinations, moving from the W sound in what's up to the tricky consonant clusters in pleasure to meet you.
Which keeps the brain fully engaged.
Yes, and it completely prevents that robotic recitation fatigue.
So you are practicing the dance, but you are trying out slightly different moves so you don't get bored.
Exactly.
At this point in the 25-minute lesson, just look at what has been accomplished. The learner understands the purpose of the lesson, they know the core vocabulary, they intuitively grasp the grammar through pattern recognition, and they've physically practiced the mouth movements with 10 different expressions.
It's a lot of ground covered.
It is. And usually this is the exact moment where a textbook would end the chapter, print a glossary, and just leave you to fend for yourself in the wild.
Which is where most language learning falls apart.
Right.
But this framework anticipates the friction points. It knows exactly where the learner is going to trip up when they leave the safety of the lesson, and it addresses those traps proactively. This brings us to the troubleshooting and assessment phase.
Which I found so practical. The curriculum proactively highlights 5 common mistakes learners make when introducing themselves, and it explicitly explains the correct forms.
It doesn't shy away from the hard stuff.
Not at all. And looking at the typical mistakes for this level, it's incredibly grounded. It anticipates things like saying, I have 30 years instead of I'm 30 years old, which is a really common direct translation error from Romance languages.
Oh, very common.
Or saying, nice to meeting you instead of meet you. Or dropping the article and saying, I am engineer instead of I am an engineer.
Highlighting those specific hypercommon errors is vital pedagogy. Anticipating errors before the learner actually makes them in the real world accomplishes 2 critical things.
Okay, what are they?
First, it completely normalizes making mistakes. By a teacher explicitly saying, here are 5 common mistakes that almost everyone makes, you are telling the learner, you aren't stupid for struggling with this. It's a known trap.
Oh, that further lowers the affective filter we talked about at the beginning.
Exactly. And second, it prevents the learner from practicing and solidifying an incorrect phrase in their muscle memory. You want to correct their posture before they try to lift the heavy weight.
That makes total sense. It also anticipates tone, which is cool, pointing out that a phrase like, how do you do, is technically grammatically correct, but wildly outdated and way too formal for a casual introduction.
Right, it's giving them social context, not just textbook rules.
And right after that troubleshooting section, the blueprint does something that I think is the secret sauce of this entire document.
The story.
Yes, it shifts gears entirely and introduces a short, easy narrative story about someone meeting new classmates, followed by 3 listening comprehension questions.
The narrative application. Up until this point, the learner has been dealing with isolated fragments of language.
Just words and phrases.
Right. This section takes all the vocabulary, the intuitive grammar, and the expressions, and it weaves them into a cohesive narrative. The elegance of this progression is really something to marvel at when you map it out.
It's beautifully structured.
It moves from passive learning, absorbing the definitions of the 12 words, to active practice with the repetition and physical muscle memory, to troubleshooting the common real-world mistakes, and finally landing on narrative synthesis.
It strips away the predictability. I mean, when you are just practicing phrases, you know what's coming next. But a story completely changes the context of the words to ensure the learner actually understands them functionally rather than just reciting them from short-term memory.
Absolutely. When you listen to a story, your brain is forced to synthesize the information in real time. It's the closest simulation to an actual unpredictable human conversation you can provide in a recorded audio format.
And the questions aren't trying to be tricky, right?
No, the three listening comprehension questions aren't there to trick the learner. They force the learner to prove to themselves that they didn't just passively hear the phonetic sounds, but they actually absorbed the meaning of the scenario.
So what does this all mean? How do you package all of this up so the learner walks away feeling empowered rather than exhausted? Well, we culminate in a 5-question review quiz.
The big finish.
Yeah, and again, heavily favoring psychological comfort, the blueprint specifies that you should enthusiastically encourage listeners to answer out loud before revealing the answers.
It's an active recall exercise, but framed in a non-threatening, almost gamified way.
It turns the quiz from a stressful academic exam, the kind that makes your palms sweat, into an engaging, low-stakes game. Think about how you experience this. You are sitting in your car commuting or doing the dishes in your kitchen, and you are literally shouting the English answers at your speakers.
It's a massive confidence builder.
Huge. You get a genuine hit of dopamine when you shout out the correct phrase just a split second before the host confirms it. It proves you learned the skill. And then the curriculum closes it out by summarizing the lesson and motivating daily practice.
Ending on a high note of encouragement is so strategic. It leaves the learner feeling immensely capable, which is the ultimate fuel for daily practice.
Because if you feel defeated, you just quit.
Exactly. If an educational tool leaves you feeling defeated or stupid, you will find a million excuses not to practice tomorrow. If it leaves you feeling victorious, even in a small, incremental way, you will eagerly come back for the next lesson.
So looking at this English with Ease framework, it just proves that teaching a complex skill isn't about throwing a textbook at someone.
Definitely not.
It isn't about crushing them with the weight of the entire language ecosystem on day one. It's about careful pacing. It's about aggressively avoiding academic jargon, anticipating their likely mistakes so they don't have to be embarrassed in public, and providing a safe, controlled space for them to physically practice out loud.
It fundamentally respects the learner's cognitive load. It gives them exactly what they need to succeed in the very next social interaction they have, and absolutely nothing more.
And for you listening, as you navigate your own learning journeys, I think that's a philosophy we can all appreciate in this era of absolute information overload. A structural framework that respects your time, actively builds your psychological confidence, and actually delivers on its promise to get you speaking in 25 minutes.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought to take away and mull over.
Oh, lay it on us.
If this simple, deeply empathetic framework, which focuses entirely on practical repetition, immediate definitions, and skipping the heavy theory, works so perfectly for something as notoriously complex as language acquisition,
Yeah.
how might you apply this exact same coding with ease structure to master the next intimidating skill in your own life?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Whether you are trying to learn complex Python coding or gourmet cooking or public speaking, maybe the secret isn't finding a bigger, denser textbook to memorize. Maybe the secret is just finding the equivalent of a simple hello, understanding precisely why it matters, and physically practicing it until you are confident enough to take the very next step.
Don't drop yourself in the middle of a foreign city with a 10-pound dictionary. Just find your simple hello and start right there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.